Excuse me. Okay, lovely. So I'm gonna do your intro like later, like separately. So we'll basically just jump right in.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, Valerie Rubin is here with us today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well, Olivia. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
My pleasure. This is going to be of great service to my audience. I'm really excited to dive into this topic, anxious attachment style. Guilty of having anxious attachment style myself, so I'm really excited to hear everything and anything you have to say on this topic. So let's get into anxious attachment style. First of all, what is it?
Yes, so what is an anxious attachment style is, when we grew up, we learned that our needs mattered or didn't matter. So if you have an anxious attachment style, most likely you had parents who were emotionally unavailable or inconsistently met your needs. So, what happens in adulthood and as the child grows up is we learn to abandon our own needs in order to keep our attachment to our survival, which is our parents. So, when we're young, we can't just leave. So, we become hyper attuned to other people's needs, hypersensitive to their feelings. So then we can start to go into people pleasing mode or over giving, not feeling good enough. And these are all stemming from this conditioning that we had when we were children. And when we're young, we don't we don't have access to our logical part of our mind. So what ends up happening is because our parent or parents are emotionally unavailable, we don't think, oh, maybe it's because they're going through a hard time or they're stressed out at work. We think we're not enough. Something's wrong with me. And that's why they're not paying attention to me or not giving me the love that I need or needed.
Right. Okay. So there are various attachment styles. Do you want to just kind of take us through what those are? Obviously, we're going to be focusing on anxious attachment, but let's just get an overview of like all the various attachment styles there are out there because there are a few different ones.
Yes, absolutely. So there is that anxious attachment. So, and I'll just share a little bit more on some other things that can show up with anxious attachment. Like we said, that not feeling enough, feeling like something's wrong with me. Another layer is like feeling jealousy, struggling with trust issues, struggling with really just trusting our partner that they will be there for us, as well as codependency. That's a really common thing because when we didn't get those needs met in childhood, we end up projecting that onto our partner. So some other ones are, so we have fearful avoidant attachment style, and then we have disorganized attachment, and then dismissive avoidant. So those are the three other ones. Four. Secure attachment. So with fearful avoidance, starting there, they learned in childhood that sometimes my parent is dangerous if they're an addict or have a personality disorder. They learned that connection is unsafe, but they crave it, they need it, they want it. So what this can look like in their relationships in adulthood is kind of starting with 2 feet in, and then they start pulling away more and more because that commitment can feel overwhelming and they can feel very suffocated in relationships. And that really ends up happening where they magnetize towards anxious attachment. So the anxious and the avoidant folks end up magnetizing towards each other because they also have the same wound. They both have the fear of abandonment, but they just show up differently. And the only difference between fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant is with dismissive avoidant, they learned that their needs never mattered. They were raised with a lot of neglect, maybe physical, emotional, sexual abuse. They learned that connection isn't safe, period. So they feel very uncomfortable even getting close or connecting with other people. So that's how that really shows up. And this is where people who want to just stick with casual relationships or just casual sex and they just don't ever really want to be in a romantic relationship because they learned connection wasn't safe, period. So with anxious attachment, they will make their needs known, but they will feel too much or not enough for having them. Dismissive avoidance, they will feel everyone will have those needs for connection and love and attention. But the difference with dismissive avoidance is they suppress those natural needs. So those are the differences there. And then secure attachment is what everyone sounds like they really want to work towards. They feel confident within themselves. They feel like they can trust others. They trust their partner. They communicate their needs openly and they don't take things as personal. If, your partner's in a bad mood, they instantly think, what maybe something bad happened in their day, maybe work didn't go well. But anxious attachment, people with an anxious attachment will start to feel, what's wrong with me? Did I do something wrong? Do they hate me? Are they going to break up with me? So those are a lot of the differences with secure attachment. And people with a secure attachment had parents that they could rely on. They knew that they were loved. They would meet their needs and they were able to be trusted. The parents trusted their child and the child trusted their parents because they consistently met their emotional and physical needs.
Interesting. So, is it possible then, like what I want to know is if you have any of these other attachment styles, like any of the anxious or the avoidant attachment styles, obviously, like you're describing, it's coming from childhood, it's coming from what we experienced, and then it's kind of built us in this way, so to speak. Are we able to move from that to a secure attachment style as an adult, as someone who's aware of these concepts and how they're kind of taking shape in our bodies?
Absolutely. That's my entire mission is helping you go from anxious or avoidant to secure. So just starting with like avoidant. So it doesn't really matter what your attachment style is as long as you will put in the work to improve it and work on different coping skills to improve it. So, with avoidant attachment, as I've worked with primarily a lot of my clients are anxiously attached, but some have been avoidant. And as we do the work and healing, they end up going from avoidant to anxious and then they go into secure. So, basically, explaining a little bit more from a polyvagal theory, these attachment styles begin to happen because our nervous system also gets stuck in that state. So, dismissive avoidance, someone who's fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant, their primary nervous system state is when they get stressed, they'll feel shut down because, right, they've never had anyone to rely on or help them through it. So, they don't know how to handle these feelings, so they shut down. So, they're always in freeze. So, if someone is in freeze, things are going to feel very hard. They're going to feel like a mountain. We're going to shut down. When conflict happens, we're going to want to run away from it. So that's how it shows up with the dismissive avoidance. But going back to the freeze state, as you move up in the scale, we have freeze, we have fight or flight, which is anxiety, and then we have parasympathetic, which is, our when we're most regulated, when we're in that calm parasympathetic state.
Mhm.
So people with that avoidant attachment is stuck in freeze, and then anxious attachment people are stuck in that fight or flight sympathetic response. So because they're always anxious, their nervous system is stuck in this flight response, then that anxious attachment starts to get activated more. A lot of people will tell me, oh, I've been anxious about a move or I'm shifting careers. Now I'm noticing a lot more anxiety in my relationship. It's not because the relationship most likely isn't wrong or quote unquote bad. It just means that your nervous system is stuck in that state. So we want to really heal our nervous systems and rewire our nervous systems so that we can shift out of that freeze or fight or flight into that parasympathetic regulated state. So,
Okay.
but yes. So, yeah. So, just starting with the anxious attachment, we have all these different parts. The avoidant attachment, when the anxious attacher gets close, they want to run away. If you're anxiously attached and you're listening to this, or maybe you have a partner who's avoidantly attached, you might try and connect with someone who's avoidant and they're like, well, I need space. And for you, with anxious attachment, we learned that in childhood, distance meant our needs were not going to get met. So now that your partner asks for space, we might have a lot of inner turmoil and that fear of abandonment starts to get triggered. So once an anxious attachment starts to heal their fear of abandonment and really unpack and unveil a lot of these core wounds of I'm not good enough, that's when you begin to develop more of a secure attachment style.
I totally know what you mean with the anxious and avoidant and like the ping ponging of it. I've had experiences myself of relationships in the past. Like one example that's coming to mind, and it was so difficult to deal with at the time, was when we would, get in a fight or some kind of argument. And I'm the kind of person that's like, okay, we need to come up with a solution like right now, like right away. Like the fight doesn't end until the issue is solved, right? Or resolved. Meanwhile, that person's like, just storming out the door and going like, I just need to get away, like I just need to get away, I just need to cool off, etc. And they're storming out the door and going for a walk around the block, and then that sends me into absolute panic mode, which totally makes sense off what you described. So I mean, when we're in that state and it's like so heightened, how can we kind of, first of all, like calm down and be okay in that moment? And then also, like, what are the things that we can do to kind of meet in the middle and kind of work together on this? Because as you said, the anxious and the avoidant people attract to each other. So, I know that I've experienced this myself, but I'm sure a lot of others are relating to this as well. So how do we, resolve that and kind of meet in the middle, I guess?
That is such a fantastic question, Livia. So I'll just start with just validating that. Like, I can so understand that panic feeling, and that's happened to me. I'm not even gonna lie, it's something from pure experience. For me, I have dated a narcissistic guy, and when I would learn to express my needs, he left. So now
Mm.
and then I got into a relationship with a fearful avoidant, and so he asked for space, and I literally went into a panic attack. So know that you are not alone. So some things that can help you calm down and be okay in that moment. So first things first, when we're at a level 10 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 and your partner just left out the door, you're panicking, you're thinking they're going to leave you forever. The last thing you want to do is sit down and meditate, because that is
Yeah.
not what our body, we're interpreting our partner leaving as a tiger is leaving, and our unconscious mind is interpreting our parent leaving, because when we're 3 years old, if our parent leaves, we die. So as an anxiously attached person, our brain, it has those same survival instincts. So some things that I really recommend to people, especially if we're at a 7 to 10 out of 10 on anxiety, is to first shake it out. We're feeling all this adrenaline, cortisol pumping through our body. Literally shaking it out, standing up, shaking out each part of your body. You could do this with a song, really shaking it out. So that's the first thing I would do, that or dancing, allowing your body to move. And then the second one is EFT tapping. I made a specific EFT tapping for when this happens, when our emotions overwhelm us, because if you're anxiously attached, you know that feeling when you're so overwhelmed and triggered, and you will do anything to get your partner back in that moment. So, what I recommend clients to do is EFT tapping. EFT tapping really signals to the body that we're safe. It signals to the body that we can handle this. And I have specific affirmations in there paired with the EFT tapping, because when we're in that anxiety huge spiral, we have so much energy and nowhere to go. So when we're tapping on these different points, it gives our body a way to dispel some of that energy. So those would be the first three things I would recommend to clients.
Okay, excellent. Just gonna
But I
have a
do have
look
some
at.
more.
Yeah, go for it. Send it, girl.
Okay.
We're here for it.
Fabulous. So, I also have a meditation on healing abandonment anxiety. So, after you've done those three things, right? Maybe we're at a level 4 to 6. Maybe it's not at a 8 out of 10. We're calmed down a little bit. We can realize that, but we still feel a lot of that anxiety and a little bit of that fear of abandonment coming up. So, I first do a meditation with you, and it's first starting, okay, labeling the sensations. What am I noticing in my body? I'm noticing I'm sweating all over. I'm noticing my heart's racing. I'm noticing a lot of chaos in my mind, thoughts telling me that he's going to leave. Okay, first, noticing what sensations are there. Secondly, in the meditation, it goes over what emotions are here. Label what emotions: worry, fear, panic, sadness, hurt, labeling that, and then sitting with that without judgment. And then after that, in the meditation, we do some breath work, a combination of 5-2-8 breath work. So that's inhaling for 5, hold for 2, exhaling for 8. As we exhale longer than our inhale, that puts us into a parasympathetic state. So as we are doing that, we're calming down, we're really becoming the secure parent that we needed as a child and in that moment. So after that, we do a little bit of self-soothing touch. So in this meditation, after the breath work, I have you imagine your younger version of yourself who first had these similar feelings of abandonment. Maybe you're 4, 5, 10, whatever that age might be. Imagining they're there in front of you. Imagine that your higher adult self can sit right next to this younger version of you. And then we're combining that with what does this little girl need? Does she need a hug? Most of the time, it's a hug and some words of affirmation. So I have them put one arm under one armpit, the other one hugging your right shoulder. As you do this, this naturally puts the body into a parasympathetic state. And then giving a lot of just very beautiful, kind words. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here with you. Those types of affirmations. By the end of that, you will be able to, feel a lot more calm. And then by the time you've done all this processing, your partner probably comes back.
Yeah, okay, so good. I like how you described, like, a couple of things that were for, like, in the moment, but then also those can relate to things that we can kinda just do on an ongoing basis to help, regulate, and when these situations do happen and we're being triggered by them, that we can kind of already be starting off, so to speak, in, like, a little bit of a calmer state to begin with, so that's super helpful, those practices that you shared. Thank you for those. And
Yeah, thank you.
there was one thing you had said before too about, your body, the safety aspect. So it's like, it's really a trigger, isn't it? I mean, as we experience it now as an adult versus how we experienced it as a kid, like you said, if we weren't getting our needs met, it really was a matter of life and death. Because if you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, like you can't take care of yourself. So if that person, your parent, is supposed to be there taking care of you and they're not meeting your needs, like it really is a matter of life or death. And a lot of what you just described too is, awareness is coming to mind. It does come a lot. It comes back a lot to the self-awareness, which obviously is a huge aspect of emotional health and emotional intelligence. And I think sometimes too, like for me, I've kind of had this experience actually fairly recently in like a newish relationship where there was like a trigger and something had happened. And I kind of had to remind myself, like, okay, when this happened to me before, it was a life or death situation, relatively speaking. And now that it's happening, my body is feeling the same emotion, but like I'm okay. Like I am safe. This isn't life or death. And I think sometimes just having that like awareness and being able to kind of talk ourselves down off the ledge, so to speak, in that situation, there's a lot of power in that as well, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And notice that, maybe when you had that experience, maybe you weren't on a level 10 out of 10. Maybe you're at a 5 out of 10. So you had more of that access to your logical mind that said, okay, this is just a familiar feeling. This maybe isn't about my partner in the current moment. And when you say life and death, when we have these unresolved emotions and traumas that are stuck in our body, our inner child doesn't those needs don't leave, those unmet feelings, those emotions don't go anywhere, so it then links our partner with our survival instead of our parent, especially when we have that abandonment wound and anxious attachment. So really that's why I specialize in somatic therapy, because we might be able to share the same story and say, I feel this way, but until we really get into the body, if that's why a lot of people tell me that talk therapy isn't working for them or it's not giving them long lasting results. It's because when you're talking about a situation over and over again, it's happening because you're trying to find clarity because you're confused. But what's really happening is it's re traumatizing ourselves because our body thinks it's living in that present day reality as we're saying the same thing. So that's why I utilize somatic therapy, because we're really looking to feel relief in our body. And a lot of people who are anxiously attached are very up here. We're very in our mind because we learned that our body was not safe, because we have all these overwhelming emotions and don't know what to do with them because we never learned how to process them.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? Like we just never got the opportunity to learn how to process and deal with and understand these emotions, which is why I'm so excited that you're here having this conversation and I get to share this with the audience because the conversation can now be had because it's so much more like prevalent in this society and people are talking about it a lot more. And I want so badly for this to be normal, for people to have these tools and access to these tools. And when they're feeling these certain things, they know where to go, right? Which is, hopefully this space is a great start for people. So I'd love to talk about the somatic healing. I mean, you kind of described, the breath work, the meditation, those kind of things. Like, what are some other differences between like the talk therapy and the somatic therapy and the healing, and what kind of goes on in these experiences and in these sessions?
Yes. So, with talk therapy, like I said, we it might feel really good to talk about things because we feel heard and we feel like, oh, someone's listening to us. But
Hmm.
it's re-traumatizing ourselves. We're reliving it over and over again. And so that's why no amount of like work, like if you tell yourself, oh, I'm safe, but your body doesn't feel it, it's not going to help long term. So that's why somatic therapy is so key. So some things that I feel are really helpful is I have an explanation on my phone that I think is so fabulous. So one of the aspects of somatic therapy that I utilize, one of the modalities is brain spotting. So with brain spotting, it helps your nervous system locate where your trauma memories are stuck in your body so that we can release them. That way these triggers stop showing up in our present day. Because if not, we're just reliving it. And until we heal that original wound of that 3 or 4 year old child, it's going to keep showing up. So
Hmm.
we really find relief in our body. And so with somatic therapy, a lot of the times is we're locating these trauma memories where they're stored in our body. And we're also, a lot of the times, our mind will just come back to memories that maybe we repressed or didn't realize were there that affected us. So a lot of the times clients will tell me, oh my God, I remember when I was 3 years old and my dad left at the grocery store and I thought I was going to die. And they didn't realize they were just going to the grocery store. They thought they were leaving forever because that child doesn't have logic yet. Or it could be like their parent did leave emotionally or physically, or they ignored them. That's really, really traumatizing for a child. And so with somatic therapy, it helps to soothe that pain in the body. Where am I feeling this? When this memory comes up, I really guide clients, what sensations are you noticing in your body? Anxiety, worry, fear, sadness, hurt, and then processing that through the body. So then we find relief. And then they feel, then when we bring it back up, oh, when your partner didn't text you back, if you think about that same situation that's causing so much anxiety, oh, I feel like, I can see now more that, they were just at work. You're coming more into your adult self. With somatic therapy, by the end of the session, you're more in your adult self rather than reacting from this helpless 4 year old child because you were at that age. And anything that is hysterical, so to speak, I'm saying hysterical in quotes, is historical. Anything that feels too big to handle, it's not coming from your adult true self. It's coming from your 3 or 4 year old self.
That's a very important point to note. I think I've actually had a similar conversation just with a friend earlier today about this, about how, once you kind of start to understand this stuff, recognizing these triggers that are kind of from these past traumas, it becomes a lot easier. And I find it so fascinating how our body stores the emotion without our mind really remembering it. Like, yes, we have memories in our mind, but in our bodies, the emotions are stored in such a way that come back to us almost as if it's actually happening again. Like, I find this so fascinating.
Mhm. Absolutely, because when we're imagining our partner leaving, our brain and our body does not notice the difference between a real and imagined event. So you will experience that same trauma as if it's happening in the present moment.
Yeah, wow. So let's talk about new relationships. So when you're your adult self, and perhaps you've done a bit of work on this and you have a bit of awareness, but you're still in that anxious attachment, state or default. You're not quite in a secure attachment style yet. How how do you kind of stop yourself from going all in too early in a relationship? I guess it, comes down to kind of your own boundaries, but like, how do we actually practice this?
Mhm. Absolutely. That is a fabulous question of how to stop yourself from going all in too early. Is first, before you even go into dating, or if you're in early stages of dating, write down a non negotiable list. What is that for you? That might be they're a non smoker. That means they have a job. Maybe they do X, whatever the non negotiables. You will not, you realize I am not available for anything less than this. For me,
Hmm.
I just I don't like smoking. So for me, that's just a non-negotiable for me, but other people are different as I've dated addicts in the past. So for me, it's just a preference to date someone who's a non-smoker. So that's an example of a non-negotiable. So when you have this list of a non-negotiable list, you notice, okay, you can compare this to your first date with someone or first few dates or even first month of dating someone. And then have the awareness to say, okay, before I'm fully attached, I can walk away if they're not meeting this negotiable need, this non negotiable. But if we do have an unhealed abandonment wound, or we want to feel chosen because we never felt that in childhood, we can unconsciously ignore red flags because we want so badly to feel chosen. And then we're 6 months down the road and the same issues are happening from the beginning, the red flags that you ignored that you noticed because you want to keep that attachment. And
Hmm.
this is all unconscious as well.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating what the unconscious mind is doing in the background, drumming up for us that we don't even realize that we're living and experiencing?
Yes. Oh, and then another thing to stop yourself from going all in too early, and this is not a place of shame at all. This is a place of just pure awareness. If you're in a heterosexual relationship or you're dating men, men do not have the same chemical physiological reaction to sex as women do. Women feel emotionally and physically much deeper bonded with a man and will, I don't want to say over attached because I don't really like that terminology, but they will attach too soon because sex ultimately bonds us. That's what we're primitively made for, is to reproduce. So of course it's going to feel amazing, it's going to feel bonding, and that can make us ignore or cloud our judgment of these red flags because we feel we know them before we even do. Because with women, their brains are wired differently than men. So that's another thing that I would recommend. So I would recommend like try your best, and ultimately, like this isn't coming from a place of shame, just like of awareness. And with
Hmm.
women, it's just try your best to wait until you are officially committed, because then when you're officially committed, this is what's right for me, this feels good, and then sex becomes a bonus. Because yeah, we just want to make sure that we are coming into dating with seeing everything that we need to see clearly.
Yeah, and having sex too early on kind of clouds that a little bit because, like you said, we start to really connect like emotionally. We get
Mhm.
feelings, we catch feelings really hard and fast. Like, oh, I really like him. And then you kind of start to ignore those red flags or those things on your list that aren't ticked necessarily, right? Like your non-negotiables. That's such a good point. And I think like I know there's no hard and fast rule on, how soon is too soon, but I've experienced, and I love to know what you think about this. Like, I've definitely experienced that waiting a little bit longer to sleep with someone definitely gives you, and like, okay, I will admit, like, it is hard to do, right? Like, it is
Yeah.
hard to do if this isn't your normal pattern, to change that pattern and to do something different, especially if you enjoy sex. Like, it's a
Mhm.
fun activity, right? So,
Yeah.
however, I think for women, there's a power in holding off and waiting. And it's not like a power over the man, but more just like a self-empowering kind of practice. I'd love to know your thoughts on that if you have any experience around that yourself.
Yes, I have so much thoughts on that. And yeah, just when you can set those boundaries of, hey, I'm only going to go this far, I'm not going to go this far, it will also test your partner or who you're dating if they respect your boundaries. And
Hmm.
for if you are someone who wants to go towards securely attached, you need to learn how to set those boundaries. And that's a big thing with anxious attachment. We might feel guilt around it and all those things, and we can discuss that. But that's the first step, is it will test. Oh, your first test is, how do they respond to my no? If they're respectful, fabulous. If they're not, bye bye,
Yeah.
because that'll test it. So I feel like for me, it's just like making sure that you are official and committed. So I'll just give an example of like my last relationship. We were actually friends for a while, but we were friends really closely for a few months. Then we decided to date, and then also we were long distance. So it just took us longer to actually meet up in person. So
Hmm.
for me, it was around 2 to 3 months before, like 2 to 3 months of knowing each other. Like, okay, it was around 6 months before we even knew each other. But I would say, if you can, try and wait 3 months of just knowing them to potentially, if you're official, because someone who's emotionally unavailable, they might initially put on a front, or if someone is narcissistic or maybe fearful avoidant, they will put on a front that they are maybe are more secure, everything looks fabulous, you're in that honeymoon stage, but you can't hold a mask for longer than 3 months. So if you wait for 3 months, which I know can be so difficult, but if you try your best to wait around that time, you will then be able to see, okay, this person is who they say they are, and then you can feel safe with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, really, it's just when you can feel safe with them. And it's also knowing, will they care about you when you guys aren't having sex? Can you trust that they will still talk to you again? And that takes getting to know someone.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many layers to this. Like I feel like we could have a whole episode just on the topic of sex in this relation, but I
Yes.
think I think as well, like it's important to remember like, yeah, sex is great and it's fun and we get all the feels and whatever else, but there's also a lot of intimacy that can be introduced into a relationship that has nothing to do with the physical intimacy that, intercourse is. And I think 3 months, like when you were saying that, I was just like, yeah, I like that. And I think 3 months is also a really good benchmark for getting to know someone, at least to the point of, do I want to, continue to see this person or proceed with this relationship? I feel like 3 months is a really good benchmark for just, yeah, like I say, really getting to know someone behind the mask, as you described. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so let's talk about people pleasing because I know for me personally, I'm a people pleaser. I, have the anxious attachment style. I don't know if those are directly related all the time, but I feel like they could be. So, when it comes to people pleasing and like making the transition from putting someone else's needs first versus putting my needs first, like that's a really hard thing to do. And it takes practice and it takes time and it takes information and understanding and awareness, as do all these things. But yeah, could you just shed some light on that transition and some ways to kind of make that easier and actual tangible things that someone can do to start moving from putting someone else's needs before their own to like actually putting their own needs first?
Mm, this is such a fabulous question. Thank you for asking this. So, I just want to first like destigmatize people pleasing. So many people online have been saying people pleasing is manipulative, and I can understand their perspective, but people pleasing is actually a nervous system response. So we talk a lot about fight or flight. The nervous system has four states, and one of them is fawn, which is people pleasing and coping and codependency. So when we're people pleasing, you aren't even doing it consciously, most likely. So we really need to do things that help our nervous system to feel safe. So, really, the one shift to help you put your needs first before someone else's is to first realize, what are my needs? First, take awareness, what are my needs? What are my needs for security, safety, validation? What are my needs? What do I want out of a partner and with myself? And am I meeting those for myself? So, and it kind of goes into both. Like you said, is anxious attachment and people pleasing related? Absolutely. Because with
Okay.
anxious attachment, we learn that we need to be hyper attuned to everyone else's needs and we abandon our own in order to survive, in order to keep that attachment to our caregiver. And if you're listening to this and you've had emotionally unavailable parents or narcissistic parents, you learn that fight, being angry with them, flight, running away, freeze, being frozen and depressed, those aren't getting your needs met. So we people please instead so that we can get those needs met. And this isn't coming from a logical perspective. Like it can be very physiological when we don't even realize that we're doing it. So some tangible things is I would say honestly is get connected to your body. So some tangible things that I have clients do is doing that meditation that I was talking about earlier. When we're doing that meditation, and just in general, if meditation isn't your thing, realizing I like to say, 1 to 3 times a day, the more the better, checking in with your body, even setting a reminder in your phone. What am I noticing in this moment? Maybe I'm noticing some anxiety. Maybe I notice I'm calm, whatever that is. Then you're building that connection with your body because when we're people pleasing, we're very disconnected from our body because we're in that hyper attuning mode. So when we're able to consciously connect with our body, then when we're having a 14-hour day at work and then our partner asks us to make dinner and we feel exhausted, we can tune into our body and my body is screaming at me to lay down and say no. And then it will be even more painful to people please because we're so connected to our body as you're doing it daily. And you can notice, hey, what they're doing, that doesn't sit right with me. That doesn't sit well with me. It's really just, that's really a way to put our needs first is to gain awareness around what am I feeling? Because especially if we've learned that emotions aren't safe, our emotions feel too big because no one helped us with it, we will shut them down or suppress them. And that ultimately suppresses us from our own voice and from what our body is wanting.
Mm. Yeah, and I think like as well, what kind of came to mind then too is tuning into the body, but then just like I feel like if we can start to give ourselves things in such a small way, like I'm thirsty. I'll take a break from whatever I'm doing and go get some water. I have to pee. I'm going to stop what I'm doing and go pee.
Yes, absolutely. That is a fabulous way to start. And that's what I recommend to clients is starting to notice when am I hungry? When do I need to go to the bathroom? When do I need to drink water? That's building up that connection with your body. So
Mm.
another thing, especially because a lot of people I hate to even use the word people pleasers because I think it's just more of like a response that our body goes into. So when you notice you are in that mode of people pleasing and you have a hard time saying no, something that I recommend to clients is doing something called a somatic boundary exercise. If you want, I could show you how to do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, fabulous. So you can start to think of maybe something that's a no for you. Maybe that's no on food, a food or drink, or something that gives you the ick. So what would that be like for you? Something.
Mm, like I'm not really a fan of fast food. Like I try to avoid fast
Okay.
food and like eat like relatively healthy whole foods, you know?
Right. Fabulous. So you're not a fan of fast food. So I want you to just imagine someone's offering to pay for fast food for you and you don't want it.
Okay.
Perfect. So I want you to just, for now, I'll kind of show you. So to start practicing setting no, we're going to have our hands out up in front of us and with our arms straight. That's perfect. So we're going to take an inhale here. Oh, wait, wait. Yeah, we're going to inhale here.
Okay. Hands on the chest.
Mhm. And then we're going to exhale and push out and say no.
No.
So then we inhale, bring our hands to our chest. Exhale out with the hands, no.
No.
You do that once more if that feels safe for you.
No.
What are you noticing there when you do that?
Like wow, like just like like washed over like a wave of just like peace, like calm, stillness, content, presence. Whoa, that was like 3 breaths. That was crazy.
That's awesome. Yes, that's just one of the things that I teach my clients to do, especially when we've been conditioned to say yes when we want to say no, putting other people's needs before our own really just helps us to say no. No, I'm not doing that.
So is this just something that you can kind of do as like a visualization, like almost like a talking yourself through like as a routine practice, or is this something where it's like more in the moment?
I feel like doing it beforehand when you're not in that triggering moment, if that's possible. Honestly,
Yeah.
once I do it with clients once, it can become a lot easier to say no because then they feel that empowerment. But it is something that you can absolutely do like daily. Other things is like power stances, your hands on your hips, because when we're shut down in that freeze response, we're usually very hunched. Our nervous system is very connected to our posture. When we are if you envision someone who's maybe securely attached, they say no when they want to say no. They're very connected to their body. Our heart is open, our shoulders are back. We are in our power. So, also utilizing that and just once you can notice if you're with a partner and they're a safe and healthy partner, they will respect your sacred no. And then as they do that, you will unlearn that people pleasing response as that continues as well. There's so much more
It's
on
such a
people
great
pleasing.
tool. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I can share one more thing about people pleasing. Would that be
sure.
okay?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Awesome. So with people pleasing, underneath it is a feeling of guilt. We feel that guilt. And so if you're anxiously attached, like we've mentioned, feelings can feel really overwhelming. So we will people please in order to not feel that. So I like to utilize something called pendulation. So what does that mean? Giving a bit of background, trauma is defined as anything that's too much too soon. So if we're just sitting with all our emotions at once, it's going to feel really freaking overwhelming. So with guilt, practicing breaking out of that people pleasing pattern, we actually pendulate with that guilt. First, starting out with that guilt, with your example, someone offers you fast food and you're starting to notice guilt when you say no. I'm noticing that guilt in my stomach. I'm noticing my heart is really closed off. I'm noticing that I'm sweating, my heart's racing, all these things when I'm thinking of the guilt. I start with clients sitting with the guilt for 30 seconds to a minute. Then we have them switch to a safe place in their body that feels maybe the least activated. This could be even like your earlobe. This could feel like your feet planted, grounded on the floor. Now, now we switch our state from that guilt. Now placing your attention and awareness on your feet. Do you notice them planted feet? Your feet planted on the ground. You feel them feeling secure on the ground. You feel a calmness in your feet, placing your attention and energy there, and then pendulating, going back to the guilt, and then going back to the calmness. And you might
Okay.
have the guilt on a 10 out of 10 on intensity, but then after focusing your attention back and pendulating it, then it will go down to like a 2 or 0. Now you don't feel that guilt, and because you don't feel that internal guilt, now you don't feel the need to people please.
Interesting. I love that. There's so many like actual practical tools that we're learning here today. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. So I have one last question and then I'd love to wrap things up with some final thoughts. So you do a lot of work with your clients. You have a 12-week program which you deal one-on-one, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, one-on-one. So how often would you say like do you notice that in the people that you work with there's kind of perhaps a pattern of seeking seeking their needs being met through their partner and not recognizing that perhaps they're not even maybe meeting their own needs. Is that something that comes up a lot? Like, is that common in the people that you work with?
Yes, I would say you're very self-aware if you ask that type of question. Because when we're anxiously attached, we just think we try and blame because we don't feel safe in our body. So we're like, oh, our partner isn't doing X or Y or Z. If you're in a healthy relationship, this isn't applicable to abusive relationships, but we will project our own unmet needs onto them. So I'm not feeling happy because my partner didn't compliment me today. Like, And it's like, well, where are you not complimenting yourself? Where are you
Yeah.
shaming yourself? And yeah, a lot of the time, meeting our own needs, we become less dependent on them. Not that we should be completely independent. You know, we have relationships for a reason. We are wired to depend and connect. But with anxious attachment, we'll abandon our needs, and then no wonder why we feel so like thirsty for that validation. Because I don't like the term needy. Needy is just a term that's feeling, we might feel needy because it's a doorway into our unmet needs. You will never feel needy if your needs are completely being met. It's just a doorway into those unmet needs. And how to figure out what's a doorway into your unmet needs is, what do you most complain about? Maybe your partner takes up too much space. Okay, what is a way that they can meet my need a little bit more? Maybe we have a date night once a week. And then maybe we, get to talking and we get to chat and spend time with each other, maybe 90 minutes a day, and communicating that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh, so much to digest in this conversation, so much information, understanding value, actual tangible tools. This has been so incredible. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your 12-week program, and how people can reach out to you if they want to take a little closer look and perhaps work with you or see some more of your content. And then any final thoughts you might have, my dear, before we wrap up.
Yes, absolutely. So, my 12-week program is really a step by step guide on how to learn how to regulate your nervous system, because once we can learn to have that need met for safety, then we are able to go into the deeper processing work of somatic therapy, like I talked about earlier. So it's a combination of rewiring our nervous system to feel safe, safe with our partner, safe in our own body, and then somatic therapy to really help us to really process and work through those fears of abandonment, not feeling confident, not feeling secure within, so that, after that, we're able to really become that securely attached woman or man, if you're listening to this, because our nervous system state is what our anxious attachment reflects. So that's the entire program of my 12-week program. It's a one-on-one. And then how people can reach out to me. Also, that meditation that I talked about of
Yeah.
healing that abandonment anxiety, that is in my Instagram and the link in my bio at Heal with Val, HEAL with Val. And then I also have a podcast myself called the Anxiety Recovery Podcast. I give you so many, also more, free tools, tips, tricks on dating, anxiety, anxious attachment. And really, it's like free form of therapy every Thursday.
Perfect. Such a valuable resource. Thank you so much for sharing that. Go check it out, guys. Val's got some incredible stuff. And any final thoughts before we finish up today?
Yeah, I feel like also taking away the shame. We might learn new informations about anxious attachment, and we might feel shame, why can't I just, be a certain way, but just know that it's okay. Like, you didn't choose to be anxiously attached. It was conditions that you learned to in order to literally survive. So
Yeah.
just be compassionate and gentle with yourself. That would be mine. And just, take it easy on yourself. I know that's like so easier said than done, but just be compassionate with yourself, because we can't shame ourselves into change. We can only do that through love.
I love that. So beautiful. Very well said. Well, thanks so much, Valerie, for coming on the show and sharing all your wisdom with us today. It's been a really powerful episode, and perhaps we'll chat to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Olivia. Olivia, I really, really appreciate it.
Yay. Okay.